My story is a little long, but please bear with me. How it started. For as long as I can remember, I had a voice in my head. It was strange. It didn't feel like the ones that people had in movies. It didn't echo around. It didn't ever do any sort of sinister laugh. I only really heard it on the right side of my head. I guess that kind of made sense because right-brained people are said to be more creative. Some people thought I was making the whole thing up, so I guess maybe there could have been some truth to that. But it was real to me because I heard it, and I was the only one who could. When I was younger, maybe 10 years old, the voice started. It didn't really make sense to blame my brother Kieran at the time, but he was the only person I could blame, and it makes people feel better to have a finger to point. We were 10. Kieran had it all, and I had almost nothing. I discovered that the only thing I had that he didn't have was a heart. But my younger brother and I were the only ones who knew that. So I originally blamed my brother for the voice in my head because one day these girls were flirting with him and he got one of their numbers. This never happened to me. I mean, we were 10, so this shouldn't have been happening to anyone, but it did, and he didn't really even know what flirting was. I got a little angry with him on the way home for having all the fun. I jokingly punched him and he seriously punched me back. The argument escalated and he completely beat me up. It was so bad that I lost consciousness for a little while. But he couldn't just leave me on the street to rot, so he must have carried me home. I woke up to the sound of his whimpers. I was ready to swing another punch because I was so angry, but he was really crying a lot. It seemed kind of phony, but what did I know? I mean, he was only 10. We both were. He told me he was so sorry and that it would never happen again, and it didn't. He had temper problems, and I think I was the only one who knew that. Our little brother Quinn is 5 years younger than us. He got attention from people, but it wasn't for the best reason. He was a cute little boy who had a disability. He had a pretty nasty fall down the stairs when he was young. My twin and I were upstairs watching him, and my parents were downstairs in the kitchen. Honestly, I don't really know what happened because I was in the bathroom at the time, but all of a sudden I heard the sound of Quinn falling down the stairs. Kieran concocted the perfect story, and he and I both told the same story to our parents. Quinn was wearing socks and ran around by the top of the stairs and he slipped. He hardly knew how to talk when it happened, and we all assumed he would never talk again. He fell in such a way that he hurt the front of his neck and ruptured a vocal cord in his throat. Regardless of whether or not he could talk, he never seemed to try. He was probably scared of what it would sound like. I think we all were. My twin was the favorite. I knew that, and so did everyone. My parents knew it and didn't really hide it. They didn't even treat Quinn very well, but Kieran put on quite the show. Kieran made it seem like Quinn was his pride and joy, and he never failed to flaunt that part of him. He was a water polo captain who got amazing grades and was good at chess and video games and went for nice girls who also happened to be attractive. Also, he took care of his disabled brother, brought him to the park, and posted selfies with him on social media. Kieran was going places. I, on the other hand, was staying where I was. I was sort of good at math, but that was pretty much it. I was not athletic, not good at anything really, but I enjoyed video games, I guess. I wasn't good at them, but I liked them. That's really all I did with my free time. I had some friends on there too. A couple of guys and a girl who I may or may have not had a crush on. Also, I had a knife collection, which I know sounds kinda bad, but I just liked the designs on the blades and the handles. I didn't really have a purpose for them. I genuinely just thought they looked cool. I was close with Quinn too, but I didn't post about it all the time. We would hang out a lot and usually draw pictures together. That was his favorite form of nonverbal communication, and he was good at it too. So I was 10 when the voice in my head really began. It was this raspy grumble that ordered me to perform certain tasks. I was pretty scared of the stuff my head told me to do. I told my parents that I heard a voice and they thought I was lying, and then they thought I was crazy. They took me to a doctor and the doctor put me on medicine to help make it stop. Antipsychotics. They didn't really do much. I just kinda got sleepy when I took them. Another weird thing happened with my head and the voice. Sometimes I would hear wailing, like a cry of some sort. I could have sworn that once the voice said help. I kinda did feel like I was crazy sometimes. The last thing that I noticed about the whole thing was that sometimes I would get this ringing in my ear. It sounded almost like when a band performs on stage and the mic gets too close to the speaker or something. It was like a piercing noise that would cripple me in those moments. It was deafening. It only happened in few parts of my house. I think once it happened in Kieran's room. So I would complain when these things happened, and my mom's best idea was that the doctor raise my dose of antipsychotics. I did whatever the voice asked me so that nothing would happen to my family. Those were the circumstances. I know this because one day the voice straight up told me that if I didn't listen, bad things would happen to my family. Was this true? I didn't know, but I really didn't want to take a chance. I had a pretty guilty conscience. Anyway, I remember each task that it made me perform. I got caught for some and I got away with others. From the age of 10 up until the age of 14, I did these random things. After a few years, I was told to do even weirder stuff, and by weird, I mean dark and sinister. I always hated the way the voice sounded. It was like a monster, like a little creepy, raspy monster. It sounded like the voice of that person in a movie who dies in someone else's arms and utters a few last words. What made it even worse was that it sounded like a kid. Maybe it was a metaphor for my own childhood that died that day when the voice started. I don't know. But the way it sounded only contributed to the creepiness of the request. The garbled voice murmured, "Kill the neighbor's cat." How it continued. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't like a psychopath or a sociopath or anything like that. I knew I wasn't, because I was able to distinguish between what I wanted to do and what my head told me to do. I didn't want to do these things. By doing these things and by killing the cat, I was protecting my family. I mean, my family was never particularly good to me, so I don't really know why I cared so much, but I cared about Quinn. I was basically doing all of this because of Quinn. I knew I would feel compelled to protect him forever. So I killed the cat. I was shaking the whole time I did. I think I was crying the entire time, too. Then it was over. I pushed the body under a bush and covered it up with some leaves. I didn't want to stand out there and dig a hole. I didn't want to prolong this process. I didn't want to look at what I had done for a second longer than I had to. That was by far the worst thing the voice made me do. I got caught for a bunch of other little tasks that I did. They were strange, but they didn't harm anyone. My parents got used to reprimanding me for those things. I told them it was the voice, but they still punished me. I got grounded a lot, but that didn't matter because a lot of the tasks I had to perform were in my own house. I was quite the troublemaker. A lot of times when I was grounded, I would hang out with Quinn. I really loved him. He was kind and thoughtful. He always drew me pictures for my birthday. He did them for the whole family, but mine were always the best. Kieran kinda treated him weirdly at home. Quinn was almost afraid of him sometimes. Maybe I was just reading into it too much because of what Kieran did to me a few years back. I never saw them roughhousing. Quinn was never battered or beaten as I was. I think I was reading into his fear of Kieran because I knew what I knew about my twin and his violent past. One day we were drawing together and we were watching the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. I was Quinn's favorite. I knew it was because he would always draw the fish characters with buckets on their heads from when Plankton brainwashes them and controls their minds and makes them do stuff for him. They create his paradise. Then SpongeBob swoops in and saves the day with his powerful musical number. Quinn was a sucker for that kind of stuff. He loved happy endings and cheesy plot lines. I honestly liked them too. When I was with them and I was watching this nonsensical stuff, Nothing else really mattered. Spending time with Quinn was amazing because when I was with him, I'm pretty sure I never heard the voice in my head. Just the two of us, enjoying the silence, enjoying the idiocy. My parents knew that Quinn and I got along. I'm convinced this confused them. They thought that Kieran was his best friend. They thought that he was the incredible sibling, his saving grace. But they knew Quinn was loyal to me. He always had my back. I was basically a parent to him and a friend. I was kinda all he had. My parents didn't actually like him, but Quinn didn't know that, of course. He was fooled by their acting. They liked the image that his disability gave the family. It gave my parents some leverage in the wonderful parent category. They wouldn't let anything happen to him but for the wrong reasons. I just straight up wouldn't let anything happen to him. Suddenly one day things got a little bad for me. I heard Kieran scream in the backyard. My mother went running downstairs. Kieran found the dead cat. I was not thrilled that they had uncovered this specimen, but I remained calm. There was no way they would know that I did this. "What the hell?" my brother yelled. "Is this your knife?" I'm an idiot. I didn't move the knife. I just left it there with the dead cat. I don't know how or why Kieran found the cat. I guess he didn't know he was ratting me out. I mean, I can't blame him for seeing that and freaking out. It was my fault I was caught because I left the knife. Because I am an idiot. I rubbed my hands on my face and cupped them over my nose and mouth as I tried to think of what to say or do to justify this. I had to do it. The voice told me to. I remained calm. I knew they wouldn't understand. I've told you so many times. It always tells me that you guys will suffer if I don't, and I don't want to let that happen. I am so sorry. I know this is super messed up and I did a really bad thing, but please, can you guys just try to understand? Nothing, my mother yelled. I repeat, nothing is going to happen to us if you stop listening to that stupid voice. Why can't you get that through your thick skull? Go to your room. I have no idea what to do with you anymore. She was really mad. I can't blame her. I know how it looked. I think they took it pretty well, actually. And I don't expect her to understand. I mean, maybe she would understand a little more than Kieran. I never told Kieran about any of the voice stuff. How would he possibly help me? It wasn't worth it. But my mom? There isn't any blood on her hands. Figuratively, of course. There would never be. But I was scared that her own blood would be all over her if I stopped listening to the voice. And then there would be a lot of figurative blood on my hands. I walked up the stairs and Quinn was there. He had this pained look on his face. He almost looked scared. He hesitantly came with me into my room. We just sat there together. I had a lot going through my head and I could tell that he knew that. I also had the feeling he had something to say to me, something he wanted to tell me. I was right. He grabbed a piece of paper and started writing. He hesitated to show me what he had written. I don't think he was fully confident in the words he had chosen, but he gave me the slip of paper anyway, as if to eliminate any more hesitation. It read, "I have to do stuff too, and I'm scared. I don't want anything to happen to you or Mommy and Daddy." I think he was like 9 when he had this interaction. I remember tearing up. He was so young, even younger than I was when all of this started happening to me. I wanted to ask him a million questions. I wanted to tell him it was okay. I wanted to know what kind of stuff he had to do. Did this mean he also had a voice in his head? Maybe this was something different. I honestly didn't know. All I knew was that he wasn't capable of doing anything bad without feeling forced to do it. Our lives were messed up and anything was possible at this point. But instead of pestering him, I just held him. We sat there like that. He kind of whimpered a little and so did I. My parents started sending me to a therapist. They didn't know how to listen, so they thought someone else should. I think they were scared of saying the wrong thing to me. Well, therapists don't really say much at all. I know how they work. They try to guide you to your own solutions. I knew I wouldn't get any answers from this lady, but honestly, it kind of felt nice to talk. The voice subsided for a while, but sometimes I would hear those strange noises, the wailing sounds, like my head was crying. The voice and the sounds generally always spoke to me when I was home. Honestly, I think Kieran and Quinn were usually home when it happened too. It was a full house, and I heard what I heard no matter what it was. Yay me. I would go to school and come home and play my games. I started teaching Quinn how to play, and he was pretty good at it. We continued to bond in this way. A few days later, I told him I wanted to teach him a little self-defense. I told him that girls love tough guys. I don't know where I was getting this from, to be honest. I simply knew nothing about girls or what they wanted. I also wasn't a tough guy, but I taught him some self-defense anyway. So I threw some delicate punches, and he seemed to not hold back with his. At one point, I hit his body with my fist, like it wasn't hard at all, but he winced. I was kind of shocked at this potential overreaction, but I asked him why it hurt, and he shook his head no and took a step back. I asked him to lift up his shirt, but he really didn't want to. After a little while, I managed to convince him, and he slowly pulled up his shirt, revealing a big bruise on his rib cage. "What happened?" I exclaimed. "Who did this to you? Is it the bullies again?" I softened my tone. Quinn hesitated for a moment. He just stood there, but then he slowly nodded his head. I pulled him in and hugged him. What kind of person would do this to him? Some people are monsters. How it all makes sense now. I am 35 years old now, and I am in a psych ward. Of course, I'm living the cliche of 1,000 horror movies. You should have seen this coming. Voice in my head? Killing stuff? Nah, I'm just kidding. You shouldn't have seen this coming because I'm not crazy. My story just sounds crazy. You see, I was right about a couple things growing up. Number one, I was right all along, and my twin brother proved to be the worst for multiple reasons. And number two, there was a voice in my head. Well, in my ear at least. And the culprit fell out over 10 years ago when I was already in here. Pesky little speaker. Teeny tiny thing. I'm honestly amazed at the technology people have come up with. So there was a voice in my ear. It just wasn't mine. And someone had the microphone. So what happened was, I came home from school one day with my twin brother and Quinn. We entered the house, and Quinn and Kieran went upstairs together, as they often did. I was minding my own business when I heard that moaning, wailing noise from inside my head. Except this time, I also heard a loud thump from upstairs. I ran up to check to see what was going on. Boy, was I not expecting this. Quinn, my innocent little 9-year-old brother at the time, was holding a bloody knife. He was scared, sitting in the corner. A few feet in front of him lay my twin brother. Quinn really did a number on his body. I didn't ask any questions. I was kind of in shock a little, but all I managed to do was go over to Quinn, take the bloody knife, my knife, out of his hands and hold him. He must have taken it from my room. I don't blame him. He was scared. Must have been for a while. We sat there for what felt like hours, but it really was only like 20 minutes. My parents came home. They immediately assumed I did it. I had lived in my brother's shadows all these years. He was everything and I was nothing. They screamed all kinds of profanities. There was literal blood on my hands, so it made sense that they thought I did it. My own knife collection screwed me over once again. There was blood on my hands, on the floor, on my twin, and on my knife. The same one that killed the cat. And from that incident, they knew I was capable of murder. But that was a cat, and this was my twin. I would never have killed him. Kieran was dead, but Quinn was the real victim here. I just hadn't pieced it all together yet. The cops came and I confessed for the sake of my little brother. I couldn't let Quinn go down for this, but he wouldn't let me get ripped away from him without putting up a fight. Regardless of his efforts, now I'm in the psych ward. And my parents have Quinn. And the last time I heard the voice was in the room that day, gasping, pleading, begging me to stay, begging everyone to listen to him confess to the crime he had committed. He was free, and this was the first time he had ever spoken his own words.